3 decades ago, Japan was the future, and now it's stuck in the past. Japan's facade of the modern flair simply erodes away when you realize that its affinity with traditional policies is killing its economy. And when there's hope for the Prime Minister's new capitalism reform, the progress seems to be non-existent. The truth of the matter is that Japan's aging population is a money-sucking nightmare. Yet when children are born in the country, they're born indebted to the failings of the Bank of Japan. Behind the bustling Tokyo, Japan's economy is collapsing faster than you think. But before we move on, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Now, in today's video, we'll be covering Japan's new economic policies, Japan getting crushed under its national debt, and then how the yen has suffered throughout this crisis. Japan is entering the new dawn of its economic policies. In a dramatic shift away from the economic inclinations of Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister Kishida wants to carve his own legacy. His new capitalism reform promised to be the antidote for the COVID-19 recession and decelerate the slow growth of the economy. By the looks of it, Kishida's hopeful horizon packed a punch. He wants Japan to move away from the market principles and its inherent competition to move towards collaboration between the private and the public sector. You heard that right. So, let's just talk about how things are without the ambiguous economics buzzword here. What Kishida is hoping for is more state intervention in the classic capitalist model of the country that puts corporations at the forefront of being wealthy. While Shinzo believed in the powers of trickle-down economics, the current prime minister believes that's a hoax. And considering the rising poverty rates in the country, while the rich get richer, he might be right. Optically, at least. Not to mention, Kishida was also concerned about the deepening structural inequalities in the country. Corporations also seem to exacerbate the climate change crisis because, hey, the neoliberal model was supposedly self-correcting. The new capitalist model was supposed to bring the country prosperity on equal terms. Yet Kishida's failure to implement any of his promised reforms is quite concerning. If anything, he has been quite unsuccessful on the basic front where his government would have harnessed some wealth for public expenditure. Of course, we're talking about taxes. Fearing backlash, the Prime Minister didn't go ahead with increasing the capital gains tax. In reality, Kishida's policies are just a label to virtually look cool and progressive. In fact, the government has approved big spending on socially important industries at the expense of promoting equality, while the country's profiting-generating manufacturing sector was hugely neglected, a move heavily criticized. We're talking about a colossal policy failure here. What Kishida seems to be doing is mere lip servicing to appease his voter base. Sure, many Japanese citizens desire a carbon-free society, yet their leader fails to reconfigure any carbon tax to make up for heavy investments he's making in the green energy portfolio of Japan. So far, it's a mess. And this is how we know that the country's economic stability is in incompetent hands. Due to Kishida's big spree, we might see Japan losing its strategic economic position to emerging countries like Germany. There's a new world order in place, and this is just the beginning. Progressive economics is a privilege that Japan might not be able to afford. The government's newly founded disdain for the market-dominant economy might become its only poison soon, and the logic here is simple. Imagine you took a shopping trip downtown when you know your credit card company is after you for defaulted payments. Technically, you're in debt and still make an active choice to bag expensive Prada that you principally can't afford. That's exactly what Japan looks like in the status quo. Behind the vibrant streets of Tokyo and the Studio Ghibli utopia lies a dangerous secret about the country's economic sovereignty. Japan is getting crushed under its huge national debt. As of early 2023, the country owes $9.2 trillion in debt to major stakeholders like the United States of America. This particular statistic is the highest for any developed nation in the world. 263% of Japan's GDP is credited as debt. Among the G7 nations, Fumio Kishida might not be excelling when it comes to post-COVID recovery, but has kept the nation's debt at an all-time high. In fact, its conditions are statistically worse than Italy, which has had its fair share of its problems, including a complete economic shutdown. The numbers on your screen speak for themselves. These figures are lethal for the collapsing economic order in the country, and the cracks in the debt management point fingers toward the shaky fiscal reform by the Bank of Japan. Every year, the country has to allocate a big chunk of its budget for debt redemption and interest payment. In 2022, the allocation was bound to exceed the projected 22%. Yet, much for the relief of Bank of Japan, it didn't. This is not to say that the allocation is minimal by any means. It isn't. In the status quo, the country seems to spend more on lowering its piling debt than investing in state security, education, and other public sectors. So far, the backbone of the Japanese economy, the manufacturing industries, is still waiting for subsidies and lucrative packages to continue producing for that big home run, and the future couldn't be more bleak. In 2025, Japan is projected to allocate 25% of its budget to mitigate the debt problem. If that wasn't enough, the growing disparity in the GDP to debt ratio seems to dig another grave for the Bank of Japan. And here's the odd thing about the country. Historically, the bank has kept low interest rates to manage the cost of borrowing money. While the policy was never sustainable, Japan's other incentive to follow suit came in the post-COVID world. To recover from a series of systematic failures, Bank of Japan kept low short-term interest rates to boost inflation in the country, making itself an anomaly in the global trend. The divide between the interest rates of Japan and the rest of the world, especially the US, was pretty unsustainable. Even the IMF warned Japan about the potential turmoil if it increases its long-term interest rates. Debt would skyrocket. And well, the IMF's warning turned out to be true. Is anyone surprised? Not us. At the same time, Japan's biggest hurdle is the country's aging population, which takes a lot from the GDP while adding absolutely nothing to it. The government's social welfare programs and hefty pension allocations are adding a strain on Japan's already shrinking economy. Again, the land of the rising sun doesn't do well in streamlining its budget. As its working class and potential labor goes down in numbers, you're virtually left with stranded industries that can't exactly tap the country's manufacturing power. And well, the stakes are high. Find this video useful? Give us a like and subscribe for more easygoing econ-based content like this. Here's the thing though. Kishida's bubblegum pixie economic dream and the crushing debt aren't Japan's only problems. Far from it, actually. Japan's absolute nightmare in managing its interest rates has the biggest impact on its currency and how attractive it is for investors. The economic gameplay has one thing toned down. Investors love high interest rates to make money off the lucrative currencies. Ever wonder why the US is swarming with high-profile investors with deep pockets? You know now. In March 2023, the Federal Bank of the US aggressively increased its interest rate from a nominal 0.25% to 3.25% to tackle inflation. We'd say the move is textbook. The only problem? Japan has strived to do the opposite. As the country's policymaker urged the government to increase the cost of living to cut through the monstrous debt, the Bank of Japan had to keep a low interest rate. Their most pressing priority was to keep boosting inflation, and in the process, the currency suffered. For decades, Japan has refused to prop up the yen to make it a more desirable currency. Especially when the US is its most profitable trading partner, the disproportionate currency rate is disastrous. Everything Japan buys comes with a big price tag that isn't even warranted. All in all, it's a tragedy. And it gave the Bank of Japan a warning sign that it was a long time coming. In 2022, Japan had to let go of its antiquities to pour $21 billion to prop yen into the global currency market. The move was critical, yet it didn't yield much. Soon enough, the yen had fallen to 150 units for $1, Paired with the blooming cost of living and heavy reliance on energy imports, Japan was pulling itself into a brewing economic crisis that would have severe implications. Only then, the government decided to instill a series of interventions to find a saving face for its currency. Only that time, the cost was $37 billion. To state the obvious, such interventions give a quick boost to the currency, yet it is short-lived and expensive. What's really concerning is that the yen seems to plummet horribly in front of the dollar, which also had its own share of turbulence in the global currency market. A decade ago, a currency exchanger would have offered $132 for 10,000 yen. Now, for the same amount, you'll walk away with $71, and these numbers hide a potential crisis within their realms. For a common person in Japan, the staggering deep dive of the yen means a galvanized cost of living crisis. You see, with the recent boost in inflation and heavy pricing of energy imports, the government has systematically failed to increase salaries. So, when Kishida talks about the widening income inequality in Japan, his concerns sit well with the overarching reality. But the truth of the matter is, Japan's economy is collapsing faster than you think, and any deviation from the neoliberal model isn't effective. Not yet, at least. Enjoyed this video? Give it a like and hit the subscribe button.